In your relationships, are you self-centered? Do you demand your rights or sacrifice things you want? Your answers say plenty about your commitment to loving someone else. John Macarthur will help you love the way you should. Next on Grace to You. It's not uncommon to hear folks who use the word love to describe their feelings about a favorite food or a sports team, some longtime hobby, and of course the emotional attachments they have to family members. And while we understand using the word love in those ways, the truth about love is that it is not about the things you enjoy. So what is it about? To get a clear picture of what love looks like, and to grab hold of some practical ways that you can show love to friends, family, coworkers, and neighbors, stay tuned for today's Grace to You. John Macarthur will continue his study on the greatest of these. And now, with that lesson, we'll be looking at what's often called the Bible's love chapter. So get your copy of the Scripture ready as John Macarthur directs you to that passage.
The 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians is a portrait of love, and it comes out as a portrait of Jesus Christ because He is love. And I thought about the fact that here is a portrait of Christ, and the one thing that Jesus Christ wants is to have His church be a whole lot of reprints. He would like to reproduce His portrait in us. And so as we are looking at chapter 13, particularly verses 4 to 7, which discusses the qualities of love. And as we are seeing in it the portrait of Christ, He is looking back at us to see if that portrait is in fact reprinted and reproduced in us. Now what he's doing here, the Apostle Paul is pointing out to the Corinthians what love is. A love that is superior to eloquence, to spiritual insight, to knowledge, to faith, to charity, to martyrdom. Love which suffers long and is kind. Love that is the only power in the world that can save us from the stupid swagger of boastfulness and indulging in the sneers of envy. Love never begrudges, says Paul, and love never shows off. And sixthly, let's go to another one. Love doesn't behave rudely. Love doesn't behave rudely. This is such a practical thing. The verb here means to behave in an unbecoming manner. Poor manners, rudeness. You say, well, that seems like a simple little deal. You mean that's all tied up with agape, the great concept of divine love? Yes. Listen, poor manners and rudeness is saying this. I don't love you because I could care less what affects you. I will do what I want, whether you like it or not. When I was a little kid, my mom used to say to me, all the time she used to say to me, don't slurp your soup. And I used to think, well, who cares if I slurp my soup? And then one time I ate with somebody who slurped his soup. I didn't particularly enjoy mine as he was slurping his. And I realized that not slurping my soup had nothing to do with keeping my clothes clean. It had something to do with how much other folks could enjoy their time at the table. And what the idea is, he has undisciplined behavior. This is a person, a man or a woman, who has not the ability to discipline his behavior with others in mind. He's just rude and out of place and overbearing and totally self-centered. And there couldn't have been a better definition of the Corinthians. They were so rude. For example, they came to the love feast and ate all their food before the people who had none got there. They overindulged. They were like hogs when it came to eating at the love feast. Their behavior at the Lord's Supper was so bad they got drunk, kept taking the cup. Women had overstepped the bounds of female propriety before God, and the women were taking their veils off and usurping the role of a man in the church. And he's saying you are not acting in a becoming way. And the undisciplined, rude conduct of the Corinthian glossolalists had come to the place where it was the antithesis of love. Everybody shouting out, everybody talking, everybody trying to get the prominence, and nobody considering at all the other. And when you do that, there's no love there. Love is never rude, because love is always lost in how what it does affects somebody else. Our dear Lord was so tremendous in personifying this. I just want to remind you of one incident in his life. Look at Luke 7. It's a beautiful one, and it's a situation where the Lord protected a lady from rudeness. Luke 7:36. One of the Pharisees desired him that he would eat with him. A Pharisee named Simon asked Jesus to dinner at his house, and he had some other people there, and so Jesus went. He went to the Pharisee's house, and he sat down to eat. Behold, a woman in the city who was a sinner, undoubtedly a prostitute, when she knew Jesus was eating in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster box of ointment, which would be extremely expensive. She came in the house where he's eating. It must have been an interesting situation. And stood at his feet behind, weeping, and began to wash his feet with tears, and did wipe them with the hair of her head, and kissed his feet, and anointed them with the ointment. I tell you, that's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Here's a prostitute, weeping and wiping Jesus' feet and putting ointment on them. Now, when the Pharisee who had bidden him saw it, he spoke within himself. He has a little conversation in his mind, a little soliloquy here. This man, if he were a prophet, he hasn't made his evaluation of Christ yet, if he were a prophet, would have known who and what manner of woman this is that touches him. She's a sinner. Now, if this guy was for real, this wouldn't be happening. And Jesus answering said to him, isn't that interesting? He never even opened his mouth. And Jesus answered his thought. Simon, I have what to say to you. And he said, Master, say on, hypocrite. And he made up his mind whether he was master yet. He said, now there was a certain creditor who had two debtors. The one owed 500 denarii, the other 50. And when they had nothing to pay, he frankly forgave them both. Tell me, therefore, which of them will love him most? Simon answered and said, I suppose that he to whom he forgave most. And he said unto him, Thou hast rightly judged. And he turned to the woman and said to Simon, pointing to the woman, he says to Simon, you see that woman? I entered into your house. Thou gavest me no water for my feet, but she hath washed my feet with tears and wiped them with the hair of her head. Thou gavest me no kiss, but this woman, since the time I came in, hath not